The Senator David Leyonhjelm, he's speaking with the controversial figure, Milo Yiannopoulos.
Good. Now, one of the issues on which you're sort of famous, or infamous, one or the other, depending on which side of politics you are, is identity politics.
Yes.
Identity politics is a hot topic here, just like it is in the United States and in fact much of the Western world. Is it just a new version of the old bourgeoisie proletariat divide, or is there something new about it? What's behind this identity politics that we're seeing so much of?
Well, communism has failed many times over, but its fans haven't gone anywhere. What they've done is instead map its principles onto social issues. So instead of trying to persuade us all that communism, that socialism works for the economy, they've given up on that for a little bit, let capitalism kind of, chug along for a bit, and turn their attention to social issues, and instead created hierarchies of different classes of people based on skin color, sexuality, and gender, and so on. This is the most extraordinarily and profoundly anti-intellectual and ridiculous way to sort people. And it is an inevitability that if you do that, you're going to end up dividing them, that you're going to end up with hateful and divisive results, because it ignores the fact that I might be gay, but I really like the Bible and guns. You know, people are different. They're not defined by their skin color or their sexuality. The left wants to, sort everybody into buckets, mainly for electoral reasons. But in culture, where I live, it stifles creativity. It stifles free expression. It prevents people from being able to say and do whatever they want. It prevents people from being able to have real discussions. And the worst of it is the creation of double standards. Now, in a previous era, I might well have stood up for left-wingers against a religious right that was in the ascendant in the 80s and 90s, telling lies about video games and Marilyn Manson. Today it's the progressive left. Today it's social justice warriors. And, I came to Australia as a sort of warning from America. I came to Australia as a sort of to try to implore you not to go down the path America has gone down. This sort of divisive identity politics stuff that we saw at UC Berkeley in February when I tried to speak there. Well, last night in Melbourne, I think the left showed us who they are and demonstrated that those wars are already here. The problem is conservatives and libertarians don't realize it and haven't started fighting yet. You need to start fighting, and you need to start fighting fire with fire. You need to reject identity politics, and you need to reject political correctness. And if you want to save your country and save Western civilization, you need to reject all of the tenets that the progressive left is attempting to establish in culture. And that includes from journalists, from the academy, from the entertainment industry. They're all complicit in this. The variety of TV shows who booked me, and then when they saw that I wasn't a pushover and wasn't some redneck or some, fulminating Fox News host, realized they might not be able to get one over on me, and even if they had time to edit the interview, might not be able to make me look stupid. So they cancelled all the interviews. Well, they are in the minority. They don't reflect the views of the public. They're drifting ever further from the language and concerns of ordinary Australians and ordinary people all over the West. Don't side with them, side with us. Side with your voters, side with ordinary people, because we don't believe the stuff that the ABC puts out. We don't believe what we see on our televisions. We don't believe what university professors are telling us. And politicians who side with the establishment elites and the language policing and political correctness, in other words, sort of organized, enforced lying in public life, are going to be abandoned by their voters.
I can only agree with you. When feminism first became popular, many men agreed on the basis of equal pay for equal work. But that's largely been achieved now, and many women are abandoning feminism. What's happening to feminism and to those who stick with it?
Well, we should be enormously proud of the advances that women have made in the West. They now have equal access to education, equal access to the workplace. They get paid the same for the same work. A female Harvard economist attempted to establish the existence of a wage gap last year and failed to do so. When you take in women's different educational choices and different preferences, and the fact that they have to have children, which is an inescapable biological reality, the wage gap narrows to almost nothing, a couple of percent. Now, feminists like to say that feminism is about the equality for women, about giving women equal standing with men. They have it. What feminism has become, since it's run out of things to complain about, is a mean, vindictive, sociopathic, man-hating movement of a couple of people in the elite and not very much of the public. I mean, this is a perfect example of what I talk about in my shows. you'd be hard-pressed to find a journalist who does not describe themselves as a feminist these days. But it's very difficult to find any normal woman who does. And that's because they see what the rest of us see. Feminism describes itself one way and behaves in quite a different way. And the divisiveness and ugliness and the horror of mainstream media companies employing people who tweet things like, "Kill all white men," "I bathe in male tears," "Masculinity is so fragile." People just don't want to be around that kind of thing. And it comes almost exclusively from the progressive left, just like violence does. And it has alienated an entire generation of women who realize that the great victories that we should be proud of, that feminism fought for in previous generations, have all been won. And there is no place left for an organized feminist movement in society because, thankfully, we won.
You've been quoted in the media talking about Muslims and the Muslim religion. That's a topic of interest to some of my Senate colleagues here. In your view, what is the problem? What problem have you been identifying, and what solution do you recommend?
Well, I take a view that will come to some people, maybe in Australia and certainly in Europe, as shocking and as offensive, probably, hopefully. But it is one shared by millions of American voters, almost certainly millions of Australians, and the President of the United States. So it's not that marginal. As a gay man, I don't feel comfortable in societies with large numbers of Muslims who refuse to integrate. You had that story in 2016 of your Grand Mufti who gave a speech praising the integration of Muslims in Arabic, because he'd been here almost 20 years and still didn't speak English. And these things are now, you know, slightly, these are a little beyond satire. They're a reality. I mean, Britain, where I'm from, we send more fighters to ISIS than any country except Belgium, which has its own jihadi problem. Now, I live 2 hours from Orlando, where the Pulse nightclub massacre happened in the United States. This is not some fringe 4% lunatic. This is mainstream Muslim culture which routinely oppresses women and murders homosexuals. Hundreds of millions of people live in countries where I would be killed for my sexuality. 11 of them, I think, all Muslim. I'm not comfortable with the horrifyingly regressive social attitudes of Muslims in the West. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can ask any of the pollsters from left-wing organizations like Channel 4 in the UK, who discovered appalling things about British Muslims, second and third generation Muslims, their attitudes to gay rights, to marriage, polygamy, Sharia law. You know, one in 4 Muslims in Britain wants Sharia law, in which a woman's testimony is worth half that of a man's in certain circumstances. This stuff is not acceptable in Western liberal democracies, and it shouldn't be allowed. And if our new friends from the Middle East refuse to integrate, they shouldn't stay here. I don't find that to be a particularly controversial position, but apparently it is.
One final...
Well, yes, it is a very controversial position. The controversial Speaker Milo Yiannopoulos there speaking live at Parliament House. He was being interviewed by the Senator David